Welcome to the next episode of the Diorama Fabulous Craft Shop. That name is stupid. I'm changing it to Diorama and a Book. Okay, welcome to the next episode of Diorama and a Book. Today's book is Arthurian Romances by Chretien de Troyes. More specifically, Erec and Enide. Chretien de Troyes was born in the 1100s, and he wrote some of the first recorded tales of King Arthur and his knights. I've been very interested in reading them recently. In Erec and Enide, there is one particular adventure that Erec goes on that stood out to me called The Joy of the Court. A very mysterious adventure wherein he has to venture into a garden, wherein he finds a maiden on a bed under an oak tree, and he has to fight a red knight who is very tall and scary. So yeah, I just like that part of the book. Recently, I went to the hobby store and picked up this little Reaper Miniatures figure here called Sleeping Beauty. And it made me think of the story. Let's begin building.
Sire, he says, it's high time now to speak my thoughts and say why I've come here. I've kept from mentioning it for too long and can't hide it any longer. I ask for the joy of the court, for I covet nothing else so much. Grant it me, whatever it may be, if it's in your control. Indeed, my good friend, says the king, I hear you speak great nonsense. This is a very perilous thing and has brought many a worthy man to grief. You yourself will in the end be killed and destroyed if you're not prepared to take my advice. But if you would take my word, I'd advise you to give up asking for something so terrible, which you would never manage to achieve. Say no more of it. Not another word. It wouldn't be very sensible of you not to heed my advice. I'm not at all astonished that you seek honor and esteem, but I shall have a heavy heart to see you in difficulties and physically injured. And I assure you I've seen many worthy men fail utterly, having asked for this joy. They never get any benefit from it, but are all dead and perished. Tomorrow, before evening comes, you may expect a similar reward. If you do wish to strive for the joy, then you shall, though it makes me very sad. It's something you're free to change your mind about and renounce, if you're concerned for your own good. This is why I say to you that I'd be acting treacherously and wrongly towards you if I didn't tell you the whole truth. Erec hears and concedes that the king gives him good advice, but the greater the marvel and the more difficult the adventure, the more he longs and strives for it. He said, Sire, I can tell you that I find you a worthy and loyal man, and I cannot lay any blame on you, but I wish to avail myself of this favor, whatever the future may hold for me. The die is cast, for I shall never give up anything I've undertaken without doing my utmost before quitting the field. I just knew it, said the king. You're acting against my wishes. You shall have the joy you seek, but I'm in great despair, for I'm very afraid that things will turn out badly for you. But now you may be assured of having whatever you desire. If your efforts have a happy result, you'll have won such great honor that no man ever won greater, and my wish is that God may grant you a joyful outcome. They discussed this all night until the beds were prepared and they retired to rest. In the morning when it grew light, Erec, who was on the watch for it, saw the bright dawn on the sun, and quickly rose and dressed. Enide is greatly distressed at this and is very sad and sorrowful, having spent the night in torment from the worry and fear she felt for her husband who intends to put himself in such grave peril. Nevertheless, he gets himself ready, for no one can deflect him from his purpose. When he rose, the king sent him arms to equip himself with, and which he put to good use. Erec did not refuse them, for his own were worn and damaged and battered. He gladly took them and had himself armed with them in the hall. Once armed, he goes down to the bottom of the stairs and finds his horse saddled and the king mounted. Everyone in the court and the lodging places was preparing to mount. In the whole fortress there is nobody, man or woman, erect or deformed, tall or short, weak or strong, who is able to go but stays behind. When they move off, there is a great hubbub and noise in all the streets, for great and humble folk alike were crying, Alas, alas, knight, you were betrayed by joy, the one you expect to achieve, but you're going in quest of your grief and death. And every single one says, This joy, God's curse on it, for through it so many worthy men have been slain. This very day it will doubtless bring greater harm than ever before. Erec listens and hears clearly what is being said on him, up and down. Alas, 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 how disastrous for you, handsome, noble, able knight. It would indeed be unjust that your life should end so soon, and that by some unhappy chance you should be wounded or injured. He plainly hears the words that are spoken, but nevertheless passes on with his head unbowed and giving no signs of cowardice. Whoever may speak, he is very impatient to see and knows for certain why they are all in such dread, distress, and torment. The king leads him out of the fortress into a nearby garden. and all the people follow, praying God to grant him a joyful outcome to his trial. But I must not pass on, for fear of tiring and wearying my tongue, without telling you the true facts about the garden according to the story. Round the garden there was no wall or fence except of air. Yet by magic the garden was enclosed on every side by air, so that nothing could enter it, any more than if it were ringed about by iron, unless it flew in over the top. And all summer and winter it had flowers and ripe fruit. Now the nature of the fruit was such that it could be eaten inside, but to take it out was impossible. For if anyone did want to carry any out, he would never get back to the gate, or ever leave the garden until he had put the fruit back in its place. And there is no bird that flies under heaven and gives pleasure to man that does not sing there for his enjoyment and delight, with the number of each species to be heard there. And in its whole length and breadth, the earth bears no spice or root useful for making medicine that has not been planted there and is not to be found in abundance. The throng of people, King of Rain, and all the others went in through a narrow entrance. Erec went riding through the garden, lance in rest, taking great pleasure in the sound of the birds singing there, since for him they denoted his joy, the thing he most longed for. But he saw an awesome thing that might have terrified the boldest warrior among all those we know, be it Tiabout the Slav, or Espinal, or Fernaju, for in front of them on sharpened stakes there were bright, shining helmets, each with a man's head beneath its rim. But at the end of the stakes was one which carried nothing as yet, except only a horn. He does not know the meaning of this, but, without hesitating on that account, asks the king, who was by his right side, what this might be. The king explains, saying to him, "My friend, do you want to know the meaning of what you see here? You want to be most alarmed if you're at all concerned for your safety, for that single stake on its own, where you see the horn hanging, has waited a long time. But we don't know for whom, whether it waits for you or for someone else. Take care your head isn't put there, for the stake stands there for that purpose. I had given you fair warning before you came here. I don't expect you ever to get out, but to be slain and cut to pieces, for we now suppose that the stake is waiting for your head. And should it happen that it is put there, as it promises to be, then as soon as your head is fixed on it, another stake will be set up next to it to wait for the coming in turn of I know not whom. I shall tell you no more of the horn, but that no one has ever been able to sound it. Yet if any man can sound it, his reputation and honor will thereby increase and surpass that of all those in the land, and he will have gained such respect that everyone will come to honor him and regard him as the best of them all. Have your people withdraw, quick, for the joy will shortly arrive, and, I fancy, make you sorry." With that, King of Rain leaves them, and he bends down to Enide, who is in great distress at his side. And yet she kept silent, for grief expressed in words does not really hurt unless it is also heartfelt. Then, well knowing her heart, he said to her, "Dear sweet sister, noble, loyal, and prudent lady, I know just what you're thinking. I can well see you're very afraid, but you don't yet know of what. You're alarmed over nothing, though, until you've seen my shield hacked to pieces and me wounded in the body, and seen the blood spread over the links of my bright hauberk, my helmet broken and dented, and myself recreant and weary, no longer able to defend myself and having to hope and beg for mercy against my wishes. Then is the time for you to lament, but you've begun too soon. Sweet lady, you don't even know what is to happen, nor do I. Your dismay is pointless. But know for a fact that if I possessed no courage except what your love gives me, I should certainly not fear to face in single combat any man alive. I'm foolish, though, to boast. Not that I say this out of arrogance, but only because I want to comfort you. So be comforted and stop worrying. I can't wait here any longer, and you may come no further with me, for according to the king's orders, I mustn't take you any further." With that, King of Rain leaves him, and Erec bends down to Enide, who is in great distress at his side. Then he kisses her and commends her to God, and she him. But she is extremely unhappy not to be able to follow and escort him until she sees with her own eyes the nature of the adventure and how he will fare. But because she must stay and cannot follow any further, she remains behind, grieving and distressed. Then he went off along a path, alone and with no one for company, until he came across a silver bed covered with a gold-embroidered cloth in the shade of a sycamore. And on the bed was a maiden with an attractive figure, lovely face, and as much beauty as one could wish. There she was, sitting all alone. I have no wish to describe her further, but if one could feast one's eyes on her adornment and her beauty, one might say that never did Lavinia of Laurentum, who was so very fair and attractive, possess a quarter of her beauty. Erec, wishing to see her more closely, proceeds in her direction. Then suddenly, there comes a knight wearing crimson armor who is remarkably tall.
Okay, mid-video update. The project has been going fine so far. I'm not super pleased with this edge here, but, you know, I don't think I'll ever be able to come up with a perfectly flush or smooth edge to save my life, so I've accepted it. For the tree itself, I used a method of combining a Woodland Scenics tree armature with dried plant material that you buy in the florist's aisle at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or that kind of a place. And I gotta say that actually produces a surprisingly realistic effect that can actually compete with Super Tree in my opinion. It certainly has a different branch structure, but making this tree was actually kind of a pain. It's mainly because of this stuff, 3M Super 77. I've always had trouble with it. I just can't get it to work quite as I intend. I gave it a good spray down, and I wanted it to give it a bit so that it can become tacky, as the instructions say to do. And it turns out that this is my downfall, because when I went to put the foliage on, it didn't work at all. And on top of that, it frosted horribly. I had to resort to spray painting it again in order to just get rid of that frosting. Yeah, so then I sprayed it down and I put the foliage back on, and this time it actually stuck. One thing that I hate about Super 77 is that it seems like every time I use it, you know, a week after the fact, you pluck it onto the table and then it just all falls off. It just doesn't stick. So what I always do is that I just drown it in matte varnish really soon afterwards, and that seems to preserve it pretty good. Like doing this would be fatal if I didn't add that matte varnish. I hate Super 77, but all spray adhesives suck, so I'm sorry, I just got a bit emotional. It probably works magically perfect for you. One other update I want to make. I painted Sleeping Beauty here. I finished her. I'm sorry you'll be seeing B-roll of my really bad painting skills and my even worse brushes. I'm gonna cut it down, don't worry, it'll be really quick. It's not a very good paint job. I've never really claimed to be an amazing painter, and I don't really know anything apart from dry brushing and washing, so that sucks. But what I do want to mention is that in the original sculpt of this figure, the razor-thin blanket is like strategically placed so that you can see her bum-bum. I don't know why, but you know. What I'm saying is that I thought that Sleeping Beauty was a little cold, so I sculpted some extra blanket onto there. And I'm kind of happy with how it turned out. It's fine. And yeah, I know that, like, I got these, but it's different. They're statues. Let's jump back to the story.
Then suddenly, there comes a knight wearing crimson armor who is remarkably tall, and had he not been over tall, there would have been no man under heaven more handsomer than he. But he was a foot taller, as everyone confirmed, than any knight known. Before Erec had seen him, he called out, "Vassal, vassal! You are mad, so help me, to approach my damsel. I scarcely think you're worthy to presume to go up to her. By my head, you'll soon pay very dearly for your folly. Stand back." Then Erec stops and looks at him. The others stood still too. Neither made a move towards the other until Erec, in response, had finished speaking his mind to him. "My friend," he says, "one can utter foolish words just as readily as good sense. Threaten as much as you please, but I shall be the one to keep silent, for there's no wisdom in threats. Do you know why? A man may think he has won the game, who then loses it. Therefore he is a plain fool who presumes and threatens too much. For one who flees there are many who chase, but I don't fear you so much as to run away. I'm still waiting. I'm equipped to defend myself should anyone want to attack me, and I had reluctantly to do so, being unable to get out of the situation otherwise." "You certainly won't," says he, "so help me God. I promise you you'll not lack a fight, for I challenge and defy you." Then you may be sure that the reins were no longer held in. They did not have small lances, but they were big and massive, and had not been planed down, so they were all the stronger and more rigid. They strike one another so violently on the shields with the sharp heads of these lances that each one goes 6 feet through the shining shield, but neither touches the other's flesh, and neither lance was broken. Each man withdrew his lance as quickly as he could, then they come together again to renew the proper joust. They clash with one another, striking with such ferocity that both lances are shattered and the horses fall beneath them. But the men seated on the horses suffer no harm at all. They were quick to get up, being strong and agile. They are on foot in the middle of the garden, and at once fall on each other with their green swords of Vienne steel, dealing great murderous blows on their bright gleaming helmets, so that they completely shatter them, and they see sparks in their eyes. They cannot struggle and strive with greater effort to injure and harm each other. Fiercely they set upon one another with gilded pommels as well as blades. They have battered so hard on teeth, cheeks, nose pieces, fists, arms, and much more besides, on temples, napes of necks and throats, that they ache in every bone. They are in great pain and very weary, yet still they do not give up, but keep increasing their efforts. The sweat and the blood that drips down with it gets in their eyes so that they can scarcely see a thing, and very often they miss their blows like men who cannot see to aim their swords at each other. The one can scarcely hurt the other more, yet they did not in the least hold back from exerting all their strength. Because their eyes are blinded so they completely lose their sight, they let their shields drop to the ground and fiercely seize one another. Each pulls and tugs at the other so that they fall to their knees. In this way they struggled together for a long time until 3 o'clock passes. Then the tall knight grows so tired that he is quite unable to draw his breath. Erec has him at his mercy, and having, by dragging and pulling, snapped all the laces on his helmet, he forces him down at his feet. He falls over on his back and has not the strength to get up again. However, reluctantly, he has to concede with the words, "You vanquished me, and I can't deny it." But it goes much against the grain. However, you may be of such standing and repute that I shall derive only satisfaction from it, and I'd beg to know, if at all possible, your true name, so that I could draw some comfort if I've been beaten by a man better than I. I should be glad of that, I assure you. But should I have happened to be defeated by a worse man than I, then I can only be extremely sad about it. You wish to know my name, my friend, says Erec. Then I shall tell you, and not leave here before I have. But it will be on condition that you tell me at once why you're in this garden. I want to know the whole story, both your name and what the joy is, for I'm very anxious to hear the truth from beginning to end. Sir, says he, I'll not hesitate to tell you all you wish. Erec withholds his name from him no longer. Did you ever hear speak, he asks, of King Locke and his son Erec? Yes, indeed, sir, I knew him well, for I was at his father's court for many a day before I was knighted, and, had he had his wish, I would not have left his company on any account. Then you must know me well, if you were once with me at the court of my father the king. By my faith, so things have turned out well for me. Now let me tell you who has kept me so long in this garden. I'll tell the truth, however reluctantly, since you've asked me to. That maiden sitting over there loved me from childhood, and I her. And this garden was a source of pleasure for us both. Our love grew and developed until she asked me a favor, but without naming it. Who would deny his sweetheart anything? There's no lover who doesn't completely carry out his mistress's every desire without any omission or deception, so far as he's at all able. I agreed to her wish, and when I'd agreed, she wanted me to go further and swear to it. Had she wanted still more, I'd have done more. Still, she took me at my word. I made her the pledge, but without knowing what. In time, I was knighted. King of Rain, whose nephew I am, dubbed me in the presence of many worthy men in this very garden where we are. My damsel sitting there immediately took me up on my word, saying I'd pledged her never to leave this place until some knight should come and vanquish me in armed combat. I was right. It was right that I should stay rather than break my oath, even though I should never have pledged it. Since I saw the good in her, I should not give any indication or impression to this person who was dearest to me that I was displeased with anything. For had she noticed it, she would quickly have withdrawn her heart from me, and I would not have wished that on any account, whatever might happen. In this way my damsel intended me to stay here for a long while. She thought the day would never arrive when a knight able to overcome me would come into this garden. So she believed that, unhindered, she could keep me imprisoned with her all the days of my life, and I should commit an offense if, by holding back in any way, I didn't defeat all those I had it in my power to beat. It would have been despicable to get out of it that way, and I dare assert that I have no friend, however close, whom I would have made any pretense. I've never wearied of arms or given up fighting. You've certainly seen the helmets of those I've defeated or slain. But the fault's not mine, if one takes the reasonable view. I couldn't help it, if I did not wish to be a false, disloyal perjurer. Now I've told you the truth, and you may be sure that the honor you have won is not small. You've brought great joy to the court of my uncle and friends, for now I shall be released from here. And because all those at court will derive joy from it, those who awaited that joy called it the joy of the court. They've long waited for it, until now it will be granted them by you through your having fought for it. You've really checkmated and spirited away my reputation in chivalry. Now it's only right that I should tell you my name, as you wish to know it. I'm called Mabinograin, but I'm not known or remembered by that name in any land where I've been seen, except in this country alone. For never before my knighting did I tell or divulge my name. My lord, you know the truth about everything you inquired of me, but I still have to tell you that in this garden is a horn, which I presume you've seen. I may not go out of here until you've sounded that horn, but then you'll have liberated me, and then the joy will begin. Whoever hears and hearkens to it will let nothing prevent him, having heard the horn's call, from coming straight away to court. Get up, sir. Go quickly. Go and happily take the horn, for you've no cause to wait. So, do what you have to. Erec immediately got up. The other rises with him, and together they come to the horn. Erec takes and sounds it, blowing with all his might, so that its call reaches far. Enide was overjoyed when she heard the sound, and Gwivret too was delighted. He was a character beforehand in this book. He's there too. The king is glad, and so are his people. There's not one of them other than very content and pleased at this. Nobody there stops or pauses in the rejoicing and singing. That day Erec could pride himself that never was such a joy expressed. It cannot be described or told by mortal tongue, but briefly and in few words I will tell you the gist of it. The news of how things have turned out flies through the country. Then no one was deterred from coming to the court. The whole population hurries there, some on foot, some riding at the gallop, without waiting for each other. Then those who were in the garden set about removing Erec's armor, all competing to sing a song about the joy, and the ladies composed a lay they called the Lay of Joy, though it is not widely known. Erec had his fill of joy, and was served with it to his heart's content. But the girl sitting on the silver bed was far from happy. The joy she witnessed brought her no pleasure. But many people have to look in silence at what saddens them. Enide behaved with great courtesy. Seeing her brooding and sitting alone on the bed, she thought she would go to speak with her and tell her about her affairs and who she was, and asked that she, if possible, should tell her about herself in return, if she did not mind too much. Enide intended to go there alone, not wanting to take anybody with her, but a number of the most distinguished and beautiful of the ladies and maidens followed her out of affection and to keep her company, and also to comfort the girl who was exceedingly pained by the joy, because it seemed to her that now her lover would no longer be with her as much as he had been, since he intended to leave the garden. Whoever may be displeased, he cannot help going out of it, for the time and the moment have come. So the tears streamed from her eyes and down her face. She was much more grief-stricken and miserable than I am telling you, but she did still raise herself up. Yet none of those trying to comfort her means enough for her to stop her lamenting. Okay, so Enide talks to the girl, and it turns out that the girl is her cousin or something. I'm gonna jump ahead again a bit. While they were speaking together, one lady stole away on her own and reported all of this to the lords to heighten and increase their joy. Those who heard these things all rejoiced together, and when Mabinograin had heard of it, he was delighted for his mistress that she had found consolation. And the lady who had hurried to give them the news suddenly brought them great joy. The king himself was happy. Having been very joyful before, he is now far more so, and shows Erec great honor. The king himself was happy. Having been very joyful before, he is now far more, and shows Erec great honor. Enide leads away her cousin, who is more beautiful, more attractive, and fairer than was Helen. Now Erec and Mabinograin run together to meet them, as do Gwivret and King of Rain, and all the others come running up to greet and honor them, with no one loitering or hanging back. Mabinograin takes much of Enide, and she equally of him. For their part, both Erec and Gwivret rejoice over the maiden and rejoice with her, as they kiss and embrace one another. They speak of going back to the castle, for they have been too long in the garden. Having prepared to depart, they leave in jubilation, exchanging kisses as they go. They all follow the king out. But before they arrived at the castle, the nobles from all the surrounding region had assembled, and everybody who learned of the joy came there, if they could. A vast crowd had gathered. Everyone, high and low, poor and rich, struggled to see Erec, each jostling in front of his neighbor, greeting him, bowing to him, and all endlessly saying, "May God save him through whom joy and gladness burst forth in our court. God save the most blessed man he ever brought into being." So they led him to the court, striving to show their joy at the urging of their hearts. The sound of rotes, harps, and viols rings out, of fiddles, psalteries, and symphonias, and every kind of music that one could name or mention. But I shall give you only a brief account of it, without lingering over it too long. The king honors him as best as he can, as do all the others wholeheartedly. There is no one but offers his service most gladly. The joy continued for 3 whole days before Erec was able to leave. On the 4th he was unwilling to stay longer, beg him as they might. Many people were there to escort him, and there was a huge throng at the leave-taking. He could not have returned the farewells individually in half a day, had he wished to reply to each one. He salutes and embraces the nobles, but all the others he commends to God in a single word of farewell. Enide is not silent either as she takes her leave of the nobles, saluting each of them by name, as they do her with her accord. On leaving, she kisses and embraces her cousin very tenderly. Now they have gone, and the joy is at an end.
Okay, so I just finished the diorama, and I'm pretty pleased with it. I've been wanting to make a medieval garden for quite a while, and even though the story probably takes place in like a medieval orchard kind of garden, I really like the ornamental garden style that I went for here. One detail that I also really love is the vines crawling along these doorways here. They really make the garden look beautiful for me. This build was really fun, and I think that I got a great result out of it. I am very happy that I found a way to express a story that I love through diorama. I will definitely find a shelf to place this diorama on, and have it live there for a long time too. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Diorama in a Book. If you like the story, please tell me why. I look forward to making more dioramas and enjoying more stories too. Bye!